Greetings everyone, Solo Fan Dance 98, back at it again with another reaction. This is every Super Sentai season ranked from worst to best. Now, since this is almost a 50-minute video, I am going to break it up into two separate parts. And to make sure there's no less copyright chance, I've sped it up ever so slightly. So let's get into it and see what they thought was the worst and what was saved for the best.
What are the best and worst Sentais of all time? Throughout the almost 50-year history of the franchise, we've had some absolutely amazing and legendary series, but we've also had a few stinkers. I've watched every Sentai, so I thought it'd be fun to take on the extremely difficult task of ranking them all in order, from worst to best. I rank these based on what I've seen from the Toku community at large, as well as my own opinions. And with so many seasons, I'm sure we'll disagree on some of these, but of course, let me know what I got wrong or right in the comments. And without further ado, the worst of the worst. Number 47, Sun Vulcan. Now, who thought it would be a good idea to have a Sentai team made up of 3 dudes, and that's it? This series has no female rangers, and that's pretty weird. I also do not like the intro song at all. I think their suits look pretty weird, and ultimately this is just a very generic season. This series is a pseudo-sequel to Denji Man, which is a much better Sentai, and one of the few bright spots of the series is Machiko Soga reprising her role as Queen Hedrion as she teams up with the incredibly unique Darth Vader ripoff known as Hell Saturn. But ultimately, this is just not a very good season.
What do you guys think of the Vulcan Sentais? I mean, I haven't seen it myself, but if he's got those kinds of reasons, I'm kind of iffy on it because they seem mostly surface level.
Number 46 is Turbo Ranger, a vehicle-themed Sentai that is extremely forgettable, with a generic plot in generic suits, although I think their helmets do look pretty cool. One bright spot of this show, though, is the first episode, where we have the return of all of the previous Sentais. Very cool. But you know, if you're looking for a vehicle-themed Sentai, you can do a lot better than this one. Number 45 is 5-Man. Why are they called 5-Man? Well, because there's 5 of them, of course, and they happen to be siblings. In 5-Man, they face off against the Zone Empire, and this season has one of the weirder tropes that thankfully did not stick for very long, which was earrings on the females' helmets. Ultimately, this season is very generic. I know I've said that word a lot already in this video, but yeah, generic. They're just, you know, they're a Sentai. I actually had to rewatch this series because it's so forgettable that I honestly could not remember much about it. I don't know what that says about how memorable things are in this series, but take that for what you will.
Yeah, I mean, if it's that forgettable, you had to rewatch it twice to remember details. I can see why he ranked it so low. I mean, if the last thing you want is a generic Super Sentai, like each one has its own suits, Zords, enemies, everything like that, and they have to make, they have to be creative. So if they put in all that work, but it's just bland in there, there's even a point of remembering it. Like, if it's generic, then that makes sense why it's ranked so low. I mean, there's nothing to remember. I mean, the suits look decent, but what else? So, oh no.
Next up at number 44 is Ninninger. Now, I have a soft spot for this series. There are things that I really like about it, mostly Fuka and Kasumi. But I can call a spade and point out that this series has not the greatest writing, and the tone can be pretty juvenile at times. I do really like their suits though. I think their suits are some of the best, actually. But if you look online, this show gets a lot of hate. And even though I have a soft spot for it, I'm willing to acknowledge that it could have been a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, if the writing is juvenile, then yeah, it probably won't feel like the best, honestly. I mean, the last thing you want to see is like, we're here to save the world and crack jokes. Leave that to Spider-Man, dude.
Next up at number 43 is Live Man. This was the first Sentai season with an animal theme, and I actually really like their suits. But this is just not a series that I choose to go back and rewatch very often. I don't hate this show, as I don't hate any Sentai actually. It's just kinda meh.
A meh, got it.
Next up at number 42 is Goggle 5. I do not like these suits at all, and the series as a whole is just kind of bland. It's not bad, it's just incredibly forgettable. They also do rhythmic gymnastics, which is pretty strange, but this was the first season to have a Black Ranger, which is kind of a cool note.
Yeah, I won't lie. I remember with him on the suits, they look kind of like they're wearing bibs almost. I mean, it just takes me out of the awesomeness of the team, honestly.
Next up at number 41 is Dynaman. Now, they look like they're wearing baseball uniforms, which is kind of strange, but I don't hate it. In Japan, this series was nicknamed Kayaku Sentai, with kayaku meaning gunpowder in Japanese. And this is because of all of the explosions in the series. This series had the most gunpowder used in a Sentai, according to a producer. I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing. This season is just fun, and I really like the overall look of it a lot. Interestingly enough, this is the first Sentai series where the suits were made of spandex, which has come to be something that Sentai is known for. And because of the spandex baseball-like uniforms, the series was originally going to be called Baseball Sentai V-Leaguer. Baseball is pretty dang popular in Japan.
That makes sense. I won't lie, I'm glad someone talked about the suits of Dynaman. I mean, it threw me off. I'm just like, are they going to play ball, or?
Next up is Ghost Sager. I love the intro of this series, and I really like how clean and classic looking the suits are. So why is this series so far down on the list? It's mostly because of the story, but also because the cast is kind of forgettable. Now the Ghost Sagers are basically angels. They are Gosei angels. The cast is a little on the weaker side, even though there are a few that I really like here, like Eri, but I'm not really a huge fan of Arata, also known as Gosei Red. I just don't find him super likable. This season features Gosei Knight, who looks pretty sweet. He almost resembles a Kamen Rider with how much armor he has. But yeah, once you watch this season, you probably won't watch it again.
It's one of those one and done type shows. Got it.
At number 39, we have Flashman. This is one series that I almost never see get discussed, and it always looked to me like they were wearing a pair of aviator glasses.
Well, you're not
The plot
wrong.
here is a little wacky. Basically, 5 children are kidnapped by a group known as the Alien Hunters for the purposes of experimenting. They were rescued by an alien race known as Flash and were taken to different planets in order to train. Then eventually they would return to Earth to fight against the Reconstructive Experiment Empire mess, which is really what they're called, strangely enough. The show isn't bad, but it's not really great either. I do like the suits quite a bit though.
True. I'm gonna have to check out his every Super Sentai suit ranked worst to best, honestly, because it sounds like he has quite a few opinions on those.
Number 38 is Bioman. I actually quite like Bioman, and these suits are pretty dang cool. I also really like Pibo, who is a gold robot that acts as a sort of mentor of the group. And I have to say, this song is very catchy, and I find myself singing it randomly, even when I haven't watched this series in a while.
It's Car Ranger, right? Yep,
Next up
Car
at number
Ranger.
37 is Car Ranger. It is a bit on the generic side, and the Rangers here aren't super memorable, but I really like the way their helmets look, and the music in general, including the intro and outro. That's why it's not lower on this list, despite being a pretty unpopular season. But when I was a kid, I really liked racing go-karts, so there's actually something about this one that I kind of dig.
The bias is there, I see. This is Gold Ranger, I believe? Goranger?
Next up at number 36 is
Oh,
Ranger.
Ranger, okay.
And if we compare this one with Car Ranger, the reason this one edges it out and is literally one spot higher in the list is because of King Ranger.
Ah.
This dude looks freaking awesome. In fact, the suits in this series in general look freaking awesome. But that being said, the story is weird, inconsistent, and confusing at times. The season was originally quite dark and gritty, but throughout the course of the season it would flip and become a more juvenile and comedic season. And the tone shift just doesn't really work that well.
Yeah, sucks when a show changes tones like that. I mean, imagine you're enjoying a show, like, say, something like a fancy show. You're having it be like, we gotta fight to survive. We gotta fight back the opponents. We gotta do this. We gotta survive. We gotta do it. Suddenly it's this thing of like, oh, yeah, we can do all this comedy. Yeah, we're fighting for our lives. You know, we can have a good time while surviving all these horrors. No, that is not how that works. Well, there we go.
Next up at number 35 is Tokuger, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this one. This series has its healthy share of supporters, but I've never been able to get past the costumes. They have train tracks on their chest, they have train tracks on their visors, and honestly, the mecha doesn't look that great.
I mean, yeah.
This series is obviously trained.
I think I'm glad that someone else mentioned because that robot just looks so. I mean, it's too streamlined. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good mecha, but their train mecha just is like. Is it anorexic? Someone put some more gears into that thing.
But yeah, I don't really have much affinity for any of the Rangers here. It just never clicked with me. And I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to Toku shows, but I think if you're talking about a train-themed show, Kamen Rider Dino does it so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Next up at number 34 is U Soldier. I have to admit, the suits look pretty cool. In fact, all of their equipment looks pretty cool. But the intro is abysmal. The outro is also abysmal. And I never really clicked with any of the Rangers in this series. They're just kind of forgettable. I find the series to be a bit juvenile, which I know is kind of a weird criticism for a Sentai series, but it is what it is.
I don't know, I mean, it looks so fun, awesome, and serious, but then it sounds juvenile. I'm just like, yeah, given what they do with the American version of them, it has its serious moments, but the supporting comic relief is just, ugh. Cringe.
Next up at number 33
Go
is
Busters.
Busters. When this series was first unveiled, my initial thought was that the outfits were so plain and boring. That being said, there are some things that I like here, mostly the Yellow Ranger, Yoko, just because she's an abso cutie. Despite my opinions on their suits, I still feel like this is an incredibly watchable and entertaining season, nonetheless.
Sounds like I'll have to check out the Go Busters because the one we made in America, it feels like the reboot. Well, a lot of reboot shows actually, if you think about it. But yeah, it feels like feels like what they tried to do with most Power Ranger shows over here. It's just, ugh.
Number 32 is Battle Fever J. This is a throwback and an incredibly important season for the history of the franchise. Each Ranger here is representing a different country, with of course the Red Ranger representing Japan. If you're into old school 1970s Toku, this would be a good choice, but I just have to point out that Miss America is absolutely terrifying. And having a wig on top of her helmet is kind of a strange choice.
Just a little. I won't lie, when I first saw the all-female Rangers Henshin, I was just like, what did they do with that one?
Next up at number 31 is
Go
Go
Onger.
Onger, another
Go Onger,
vehicle-themed
okay.
Sentai. This one lands somewhere in the middle. The suits here are okay, but I've never really been a fan of the seatbelts on their suits. The intro is pretty weak, in my opinion, but despite those things, I'll still give Go Onger a nice rewatch every now and then.
I think what threw me was the talking mechs.
Next up at number 30 is Kira Major. This show is bright. extremely bright, which makes sense because Kiramager can be translated as Sparkling Ranger.
At least they're following the title.
The theme of this season is gemstones, but to me, they kind of always look like Jolly Ranchers. When I think of this season, I think of it as Jolly Rancher Ranger. The suits are not my favorite.
Great, I can't unsee that now. Oh boy, either that or Rock Candy Rangers. One of those two.
They're kind of plain, with the only thing to really give them some flair being the shininess. Unfortunately, the production of this season was stopped in its tracks due to the pandemic in 2020. And there are only 45 episodes. So who knows? If not for that, it could be higher on the list, but probably not.
This is somewhere in the middle. Gao Ranger.
Number 29 is Gao Ranger. This series is not offensively bad, but it's also not exceptionally great or memorable. We've had a lot of animal-themed Sentais, but this one is pretty elaborate, and I do like their costumes, as well as the mechas.
I was gonna say, the mechas are the ones that remind me the most, and also the fact of how they literally are beast-like with their movements.
But I do like Sei, the White Ranger, quite a bit, and I think she has one of the cooler White Ranger suits. Next up at 28 is Jojer. So somebody at Toei had the idea to mix Minecraft with animals, and we have Jojer. Everybody on the team, except for the Red Ranger, is a Jumen, which is basically an animal that can take on the appearance of a human as to blend in better. Despite the kind of strange concept, there is a ton of charm in this season, and I do find myself rewatching it quite a bit.
Okay, so someone did use Minecraft as inspiration. Okay, that makes more sense. I had that question a while ago.
Next up at 27 is Jaka, Dengeki Tai. This is of course a playing card themed season, and to me it's kind of a tale of two seasons. The first half is sort of generic, but watchable nonetheless. However, when Big One is introduced, the show becomes far more entertaining. And this is due to the sheer charisma of Big One. He is a master of disguise, and it's often quite entertaining to see what he's going to wear next. This song is also an earworm, and it gets stuck in my head quite a bit. Number 26 is Geki Ranger. Somebody at Toei watched The Jungle Book because Jen, our Red Ranger here, was literally raised by tigers in the forest.
Well, there we go.
This season is themed around Kung Fu with a sort of cat motif, which is kind of unique for Sentai. I really like their suits here, just because there are no other Sentais really that look like Geki Ranger, except for Geki Ranger.
Dang, that's already a better backstory than what they did in the States with, I've forgotten the English equivalent of the Power Ranger team there. Yeah, Geki Ranger, raised by tigers, better than being a guy who just practices Kung Fu. That's way more interesting, honestly.
When the series came out, I just thought it was so fresh and entertaining. Not one that gets a lot of love in the community, but it's pretty good nonetheless.
Fair enough.
Next up at number 25 is Gingaman. I really think that this show has one of the best intros in the franchise, but despite that, it suffers a little bit because it's kind of forgettable.
Oh.
First of all, the suits are okay, but the helmets I think are pretty lacking. And this show also features one of my weird pet peeves, and that is when the Rangers are unhinged, instead of wearing regular clothes, they're wearing strange warrior outfits. And this is something that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine in Sentai. I honestly can't tell you why, but yeah, I don't like these strange warrior costumes.
Oh. Each their own. I don't mind them.
I don't really see people saying that this is one of the worst Sentais, but I also don't see people saying that this is one of the best Sentais. So it falls somewhere in the middle.
Honestly, this and I think Mega Ranger was that one for the equivalent of Power Rangers in space. But yeah, I think this is actually pretty decent, by all things considered, because especially since I'm a big fan of the Magna Ranger. He's pretty dang good. Mm.
Next up is Go-Go 5, another somewhat forgettable season from the late 90s/early 2000s. The Rangers
Fair.
in this season have their visors open up, so you can see part of their face from within their helmets. And this is something that I think is pretty cool and unique. The show is themed around emergency services and first responders. This is a decently entertaining series to watch, but it's in the middle of the list, which is where I think it belongs.
I mean, fair. I only remember pieces of Lightspeed Rescue myself, the English equivalent to that one. So let's see what Kyotama is like. The Q Ranger.
Next up is Q Ranger at number 23, and if you like Sentai seasons with a ton of Rangers, this is a good one for you. I really like all the different personalities on the show, and I think the intro here is one of the best. Interestingly enough, Washi Pink is voiced by Mao Ichimichi, who is also the actress that played Luca Milfi on Gokaiger. That's always been one of the coolest things about this series, in my opinion.
Well, there we go. Alright, so I think we'll stop it here for now. We're about halfway through the list. Looking forward to seeing how he ranks the remaining, was it 22, 21 Ranger teams? But yeah, about the remaining 20 or so Ranger teams. Looking forward to seeing what happens with Super Sentai's ranking, because we're going to see he's got these guys in mind for the next rank. You guys take care. I'll see you in the next video as we finish off all the Super Sentai seasons ranked from worst to best. And if you guys agree or disagree with his and my opinions, just let me know down in the comments. I want to see where you guys would rank these shows, like rank these seasons as you go through. In fact, heck, I wouldn't mind reading through a whole list that you guys have in mind. You guys take care. I'll see you around. Bye.